In the vast windswept heart of Asia, where the sky stretched boundless and the horizon was a distant whisper, the 12th century cradled the birth of a legend. This was the Mongol steppe, a land of stark beauty and brutal realities, where life was a constant dance with the elements and survival a daily prayer. Here, amidst the endless grasslands and beneath an immense, indifferent sky, a boy named Temujin entered the world, destined to reshape it. His early years were not marked by prophecy or privilege, but by the biting wind, the gnawing hunger, and the omnipresent threat of rival clans. It was a world where a child learned to ride before he could properly walk, where the bow was an extension of the arm, and where loyalty was as fleeting as a summer cloud. The exact year of Temujin's birth remains a subject of gentle debate among historians, though most agree it was around 1162. He was born into the Borjigin clan, a branch of the Hiad Mongols, to his father Yesige, a respected chieftain, and his mother Holin, a woman of remarkable strength and resilience. The steppe tribes lived in a perpetual state of flux, their allegiances shifting like the sands, their lives dictated by the rhythm of their herds and the pursuit of new pastures. Violence was an unfortunate yet common thread woven into the fabric of their existence. Raids for livestock, women, and prestige were not uncommon, and the concept of a unified nation was still a distant dream, overshadowed by the fierce independence of countless nomadic groups. Temujin's childhood, however, was abruptly shattered by a tragedy that would forever scar him and forge his indomitable will. When he was barely 9 years old, his father, Yesige, embarked on a journey, encountering a Tatar encampment. Though initially offered hospitality, Yesige was subtly poisoned, a common, insidious tactic of the time to weaken rival leaders without direct confrontation. He returned home, gravely ill, and soon succumbed to the poison, leaving his family utterly vulnerable. This act of treachery plunged Temujin, his mother, and his younger siblings into a desperate struggle for survival. The clan, seeing an opportunity to shed the burden of a widow and her young children, abandoned them, leaving them to fend for themselves on the unforgiving steppe. This was not merely an act of cruelty, but a calculated move in the harsh calculus of nomadic life. A family without a strong male protector was deemed a liability, a drain on precious resources. Imagine the desolation. A young mother, Holin, with 7 children, including a very young Temujin, suddenly cast out into the wilderness. They possessed little more than their wits and the clothes on their backs. They were forced to subsist on roots, wild berries, and the occasional fish caught in streams. Stories tell of Holin's extraordinary resourcefulness, her unwavering spirit in the face of starvation and the constant threat of wild animals or hostile wanderers. She taught her children how to forage, how to hunt small game, and perhaps most importantly, how to endure. This period of extreme deprivation was a crucible for Temujin. It taught him the bitter taste of betrayal, the value of loyalty, and the absolute necessity of self-reliance. He learned that in a world without mercy, one must create their own. One lesser-known detail from this period illuminates the raw, unvarnished nature of their struggle. During their abandonment, food was so scarce that even small game was fiercely contested. A dispute arose between Temujin and his half-brother Bektur over a captured lark or a small fish. In a moment of impulsive rage, fueled by hunger and the desperate scramble for survival, Temujin, aided by his full brother Kasar, killed Bektur. This act, though shocking, speaks volumes about the brutal environment that shaped him. It was a world where even familial bonds could fray under the immense pressure of starvation, where the instinct for survival could override all other considerations. This dark episode, often glossed over, reveals the nascent ruthlessness that would later characterize his leadership, tempered by a profound understanding of loyalty and the consequences of its absence. The years that followed were a blur of constant movement and narrow escapes. Temujin, still a boy, was forced to mature rapidly. He was captured by a rival clan, the Taichiud, who had once been allied with his father. They saw him as a potential threat, a scion of Yasuge who might one day seek revenge. He was enslaved, forced to wear a kangyu, a heavy wooden yoke that restricted his movement and marked him as a prisoner. This was a profoundly humiliating experience for a boy of the steppe, where freedom was paramount. Yet even in captivity, Temujin's innate cunning and determination shone through. He managed a daring escape, aided by a sympathetic guard slipping away under the cover of darkness. This escape was not just a flight to freedom, it was a testament to his resilience, his refusal to be broken, and his nascent ability to inspire loyalty even in strangers. Historians still disagree whether Temujin's early hardships were merely formative experiences, or if they instilled in him a deep-seated desire for vengeance and absolute control. Was his later ambition a direct result of the betrayals he suffered? A desperate need to create a world where such vulnerability was impossible? Or was it a more pragmatic understanding that only through absolute unity and strength could the Mongol people transcend their fragmented, perpetually warring existence? There is no definitive answer, but it is clear that these early trials forged a leader of extraordinary resolve. He learned that alliances were fragile, that enemies could emerge from unexpected quarters, and that the only true security lay in unwavering strength and the cultivation of unshakable loyalty among his followers. The harshness of the steppe, the betrayal of his own clan, the starvation, and his enslavement, these were not merely unfortunate events. They were the raw materials from which Temujin's character was forged. They instilled in him a profound understanding of human nature, its capacity for both cruelty and loyalty. He learned to read the land, to understand the subtle shifts in power among the tribes, and to value the simple yet profound bonds of kinship and shared struggle. The early years of Temujin were a masterclass in survival, a brutal education that prepared him unknowingly for the monumental task of uniting the disparate, warring tribes of the steppe. He was a product of his environment, yet destined to transcend it, to bend its wild energies to his will, and to cast a shadow that would stretch across continents. His journey from an abandoned orphan to the future Genghis Khan had begun, not with a roar, but with the quiet, desperate struggle for each new dawn. If you're enjoying this, liking and subscribing truly helps and is much appreciated. The wind, which had once seemed to mock him with its freedom, now carried a different kind of chill. Temujin, no longer a carefree child of the steppe, found himself shackled, a captive of the Taichiud clan, the very people who had once claimed kinship. His father's former allies, driven by a shifting landscape of power and fear, had betrayed his trust. He was barely in his teens, perhaps 13 or 14, when this new chapter of hardship began. The Taichiud, fearing the growing legend of Yasuge's son, sought to extinguish the spark before it could ignite. They fitted him with a kangyu, a heavy wooden yoke that locked his neck and wrists, turning him into a permanent spectacle of their dominance. It was a cruel, cumbersome device, designed to humiliate and incapacitate, making escape seem an impossible dream. Yet, even beneath the weight of the Kangyu, the young Temujin's spirit remained unbroken. He was forced into servitude, herding goats and performing menial tasks, but his eyes, sharp and observant, never ceased to scan the horizon, to note the routines of his captors, to seek the smallest seam in their vigilance. It was during this time that he met the humble Sorkin Shira, a Tayashid elder who, perhaps sensing the extraordinary spirit within the boy, offered small kindnesses. Sorkin Shira's sons, recognizing the injustice of Temujin's plight, also began to show him quiet favor. It was a testament to Temujin's innate charisma, even in his darkest hour, that he could inspire loyalty from within the ranks of his oppressors. The opportunity came, as it always does for the watchful, during the chaos of a Tayashid feast. The guards, their attention dulled by drink and revelry, grew lax. Temujin, with a strength born of desperation, managed to slip away. The Kangyu, however, was still a heavy burden. It clattered and snagged, threatening to betray his every move. He sought refuge in the river, submerging himself, leaving only his nostrils above the water, hoping the reeds would conceal him. But the Tayashid were skilled trackers. They found him, not by sight, but by the telltale bubbles rising from his hidden form. It was Sorkin Shira's sons, though, who intervened. They pretended to have captured him, then deliberately loosened his bonds, allowing him to escape again. A quiet act of defiance against their own clan. This time, he found refuge with a family named the Jalair, who, though they knew the Tayashid would pursue him, bravely offered him shelter, hiding him in a cart filled with wool. This second escape, aided by those who saw his true worth, underscored a crucial aspect of his emerging leadership: his ability to forge bonds of loyalty across tribal lines, even with those who should have been his enemies. Once free, Temujin did not forget those who had helped him. He returned to his family, to his mother, Holun, who had endured so much, and to his younger siblings. The years of hardship had forged a steely resolve within him. He was no longer just Yasuge's son. He was a survivor, a leader in the making. His first priority was to reclaim what was rightfully his, and to protect his nascent family. The theft of their horses, a vital resource on the steppe, by a rival clan, the Besud, prompted his first independent act of leadership. He pursued them not with a large army, but with a single companion, a young man named Borlin, whom he met along the way. Borlin, impressed by Temujin's quiet determination and courage, swore loyalty to him, becoming one of his earliest and most trusted companions. This small, personal victory, the recovery of their stolen herd, was more than just an act of survival. It was a declaration of his intent, a signal that he would not be easily dispossessed. The story of Temujin's rise is often told through the lens of grand battles and political maneuvering. But it began with these small, personal acts of loyalty and defiance. He understood, perhaps instinctively, that true power lay not in inherited titles, but in the unwavering devotion of those who chose to follow him. He began to gather around him a diverse group of individuals, drawn from various clans, some of whom had once been his enemies. Among them was Jamuka, his unda, or blood brother, from their childhood. Their bond was deep, forged in shared experiences and mutual respect, but it was also destined to be tested by the very ambition that drove them both. The early years of Temujin's adult life were a delicate dance of alliances and betrayals. The steppe was a mosaic of nomadic clans, constantly shifting, forming temporary coalitions and dissolving just as quickly. There were the Merkits, who had once abducted Holun and who later abducted Temujin's young wife, Berte, in retaliation for an old grievance. This act of aggression, a direct challenge to his burgeoning authority, became a pivotal moment. Temujin, still relatively weak, turned to his Onda, Jamuka, and to Togrul, the powerful leader of the Karaite clan, who had been Yasuge's Onda. This alliance, a testament to the enduring power of blood brotherhood and inherited loyalties, marked Temujin's first major military campaign. Together, they launched a devastating raid against the Merkits, rescuing Bertay and demonstrating Temujin's growing capacity for strategic action. It was after Bertay's return that she gave birth to Jochi, her first son. The timing of Jochi's birth, so soon after her captivity, led to a lingering question that historians still debate. Was Jochi truly Temujin's son, or was he a son of the Merkit captor? This uncertainty, though never openly acknowledged by Temujin, would cast a long shadow over Jochi's life and the question of succession, creating subtle tensions within the family. Yet, Temujin, with characteristic pragmatism, always treated Jochi as his own, integrating him fully into the family and future leadership. Perhaps he understood that the strength of his nascent clan lay in unity, not in questioning. The alliance with Togrul, his father's Onda, proved crucial in these formative years. Togrul, a seasoned and respected leader, offered Temujin protection and guidance, acting as a surrogate father figure. Temujin, in turn, proved to be a loyal and capable subordinate, demonstrating his military prowess in campaigns against rival clans. He learned the intricacies of steppe politics, the art of negotiation, and the brutal realities of warfare. He absorbed lessons from Togrul's vast experience, but he also began to develop his own unique approach to leadership. One lesser-known detail from this period reveals Temujin's innovative approach to military organization. Unlike the traditional steppe armies, which were often loosely organized along clan lines, Temujin began to integrate warriors from different backgrounds into unified units, promoting individuals based on merit rather than tribal affiliation. This was a radical departure, fostering a sense of shared identity and loyalty directly to him rather than to a particular clan. He also began to implement a system of decimal organization, dividing his forces into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, making his army more disciplined and efficient than any seen before on the steppe. However, the bond between Temujin and Jamuka, once so strong, began to fray. Both were ambitious, charismatic leaders, and the steppe was not large enough for two sons. The exact cause of their rift is shrouded in the mists of time, but it likely stemmed from differing philosophies of leadership and governance. Jamuka, a more traditionalist, perhaps favored the old ways of tribal autonomy and shifting alliances. Temujin, on the other hand, was moving towards a more centralized, unified vision. A seemingly minor incident, the theft of some horses and the subsequent murder of a man from Jamuka's camp by one of Temujin's followers, escalated into a major conflict. Jamuka, with a large force, attacked Temujin, inflicting a significant defeat. This early setback, though painful, served as a crucial lesson for Temujin, forcing him to refine his strategies and to understand the ruthless nature of power struggles. Following this defeat, Temujin's followers, though diminished, remained fiercely loyal. He had a remarkable ability to inspire devotion, even in adversity. His vision for a unified steppe, free from constant internecine warfare, began to resonate with those who yearned for stability. He offered a new kind of leadership, one based on meritocracy, justice, and a shared destiny, rather than simply on birthright or tribal affiliation. He began to attract disaffected individuals from other clans, those who were tired of the endless cycles of raiding and betrayal. The rivalry with Jamuka would continue for years, a bitter struggle between two formidable leaders who had once been brothers. Their conflict was a microcosm of the larger struggle for dominance on the steppe. Temujin, with his patient determination and strategic mind, slowly began to gain the upper hand. He cultivated alliances with other powerful figures, including the Ongud, a Turkic people who controlled important trade routes and had strong ties to the Jin dynasty in China. These alliances provided him with resources and intelligence, expanding his reach beyond the traditional nomadic sphere. The period of Temujin's adolescence and early adulthood was a crucible of hardship, learning, and slow, deliberate growth. He was not born into power, but forged it through resilience, strategic thinking, and an uncanny ability to inspire unwavering loyalty. The Konggud had failed to break him. Instead, it had strengthened his resolve. The betrayals he faced taught him caution, but also the importance of true allies. He was building not just an army, but a new kind of society, one that would transcend the fragmented tribal loyalties that had defined the steppe for centuries. The whispers of his name began to spread, carried by the wind across the vast grasslands, a name that would soon echo across continents. He was no longer merely Temujin, the son of Yesugei, but a force gathering momentum, an iron will shaping the destiny of an entire people. The wind, once a playful companion across the vast steppes, now carried the scent of ambition and the distant murmur of approaching thunder. Temujin, no longer merely a young chieftain, but a formidable presence, understood that the fragmented world of the Mongol tribes could not endure. The cycle of raid and reprisal, the endless skirmishes over grazing lands and horses, bled the very life from his people. He envisioned a different future, one where the scattered embers of tribal identity were forged into a single, unyielding flame. This vision, however, demanded more than dreams. It required a strategic mind, a warrior's heart, and a diplomat's tongue. His first significant challenge lay in consolidating his own strength. The Jalair, a powerful tribe, had long been a thorn in the side of his clan. Rather than direct confrontation, Temujin extended an offer of alliance, a gesture of respect that transcended the petty feuds of generations. This diplomatic overture, a rare commodity in an age of constant conflict, proved effective. The Jalair, seeing the wisdom in unity rather than endless strife, joined his growing confederation, adding their considerable numbers and skilled warriors to his ranks. This early success underscored Temujin's understanding that not every victory needed to be bought with blood. Yet, blood was often the currency of the steppe. The Taichud, the very tribe that had enslaved him in his youth, remained a potent threat. Their leaders, driven by old animosities and a fear of Temujin's burgeoning power, sought to crush him before he grew too strong. The ensuing conflict was brutal, a testament to the harsh realities of steppe warfare. Temujin, leading his warriors with a ferocity born of past wrongs, engaged the Taichud in a series of pitched battles. One such engagement, likely around 1190, saw Temujin himself wounded by an arrow, a testament to the personal risks he took alongside his men. It was during this period that Jebi, a skilled archer from the Taichud, famously shot Temujin's horse from under him. Rather than punishing Jebi after the Taichud defeat, Temujin recognized his courage and skill, offering him a place in his army. This act of magnanimity, turning a formidable foe into a loyal general, would become a hallmark of Temujin's leadership, demonstrating his ability to inspire loyalty even from those he had conquered. The defeat of the Taichud sent a clear message across the steppe. Temujin was not to be underestimated. His reputation as a shrewd strategist and an unyielding warrior grew with each passing victory. He understood the importance of momentum and seized it, turning his attention to other rival tribes. The Jurchen, another powerful clan, found themselves facing Temujin's unified forces. Unlike the Taichud, their resistance crumbled swiftly. Temujin's approach to conquered peoples was often pragmatic. Those who submitted and pledged loyalty were integrated, their warriors absorbed into his growing army, their leaders given positions of authority within his nascent administration. But those who resisted, who continued to sow discord or betray his trust, faced swift and often brutal consequences. This dual approach, offering clemency to those who submitted and swift retribution to those who defied him, was a key element in his strategy of unification. The shifting alliances and betrayals of the steppe were a constant challenge. Temujin's early ally and blood brother, Jamuka, a charismatic leader in his own right, grew increasingly wary of Temujin's rising power. Their bond, once unbreakable, began to fray under the weight of ambition and conflicting visions for the future of the Mongol people. Jamuka, clinging to the old ways of tribal independence, saw Temujin's drive for centralized authority as a threat to the traditional nomadic lifestyle. The inevitable clash between these two titans of the steppe came to a head in the early 1200s. The Battle of the 13 Side. A major engagement between their forces saw Temujin initially suffer a setback. Yet his resilience and the unwavering loyalty of his core followers allowed him to regroup and ultimately turn the tide. This period of intense rivalry with Jamuka, marked by both personal tragedy and strategic brilliance, further refined Temujin's leadership. He learned the bitter lessons of betrayal and the enduring strength of true loyalty. The Khwarezmians, a powerful Turkic-speaking tribe, and the Naiman, another significant force in the western steppe, represented the next major obstacles to Temujin's complete dominance. The Khwarezmians, led by Togrul, who had once been an ally and even a father figure to Temujin, became increasingly hostile. Togrul, swayed by the machinations of his ambitious son, Sengum, and fearful of Temujin's growing influence, turned against him. This betrayal was a deep wound for Temujin, a personal affront from someone he had once revered. The ensuing war with the Khwarezmians was protracted and arduous. Temujin, often outnumbered, relied on his tactical genius and the unwavering devotion of his generals. He employed feints and swift cavalry maneuvers, disrupting Khwarezmian supply lines and exploiting their internal divisions. The decisive battle, likely around 1203, saw Temujin's forces launch a surprise night attack, catching the Khwarezmians off guard and shattering their power. The defeat of the Khwarezmians was a pivotal moment, removing one of the most formidable rivals to Temujin's authority and significantly expanding his sphere of influence. With the Khwarezmians subdued, only the Naiman remained as a major independent power. The Naiman, dwelling in the western reaches of the steppe, were a sophisticated people, more urbanized than many of the other nomadic tribes, and possessed of a strong military. Their leader, Genghis Khan, viewed Temujin with disdain, seeing him as an upstart from the eastern tribes. The final confrontation between Temujin and the Naiman took place around 1204. Temujin, having learned from his earlier struggles, meticulously planned his campaign. He employed psychological warfare, sending false reports of his army's weakness to lure the Naiman into a decisive engagement. He also ensured his forces were well rested and provisioned, a testament to his growing administrative capabilities. The battle itself was a testament to the strategic brilliance of Temujin and his generals. The Naiman, confident in their numbers and their supposed superiority, were outmaneuvered and outfought. Their defeat marked the end of significant organized resistance to Temujin's authority. The years between 1190 and 1206 were a blur of relentless campaigning, shrewd diplomacy, and the forging of an army unlike any the steppe had ever seen. Temujin didn't just conquer tribes, he absorbed them, integrating their warriors, their customs, and even their leaders into his emerging state. He fostered a meritocracy, promoting individuals based on skill and loyalty rather than tribal affiliation, a radical departure from the traditional ways of the steppe. This policy, more than any other, cemented the loyalty of his diverse forces. Historians still debate the exact nature of Temujin's administrative innovations during this period. Was he consciously building a state, or was it a more organic evolution driven by the exigencies of continuous warfare and the need to manage ever larger populations? Perhaps it was a blend of both. A pragmatic genius adapting to the demands of an unprecedented unification. By 1206, the vast, windswept steppes, once a mosaic of warring tribes, were united under a single banner. From the forests of Siberia to the edges of the Gobi Desert, the nomadic peoples acknowledged Temujin as their supreme leader. This was an achievement of truly monumental proportions, an unprecedented consolidation of power in a region historically defined by its fragmentation. The time had come for a formal recognition of this new reality. In the spring of 1206, a grand Kurultai, a great assembly of all the Mongol and Turkic chieftains, was convened on the banks of the Onon River, a place steeped in the history of Temujin's own clan. The air thrummed with anticipation. Warriors from countless tribes, their banners now bearing the symbols of Temujin's growing empire, gathered. The elders, the wise men, and the most respected chieftains sat in a vast circle, their faces etched with the stories of 1,000 battles and countless migrations. It was here, amidst the rustling of silk standards and the murmur of thousands of voices, that Temujin, the once persecuted outcast, was formally recognized as the supreme ruler. The title bestowed upon him was not merely a chieftaincy, but something far grander, a name that would echo through the annals of history: Genghis Khan. The name itself, meaning universal ruler or oceanic ruler, encapsulated the boundless ambition and the vastness of the domain he now commanded. The proclamation was more than a mere ceremony. It was a profound act of political and spiritual legitimacy. It signified the birth of a new nation, a unified Mongol identity that transcended the old tribal loyalties. As Genghis Khan, he immediately set about formalizing the structures of his new state. He issued the Yasa, a comprehensive legal code that governed all aspects of Mongol life, from military discipline to civil conduct. This code, though its full contents are not entirely known today, emphasized justice, loyalty, and order, and its strict enforcement was crucial to maintaining the unity of his vast new domain. He organized his army into decimal units: tens, hundreds, thousands, and tumens, 10,000s, a revolutionary system that fostered cohesion and discipline across diverse tribal contingents. This decimal organization, a relatively obscure detail to many, was a crucial administrative innovation that allowed Genghis Khan to command and maneuver truly massive armies with unprecedented efficiency. He appointed loyal generals, the 4 dogs and the 4 steeds, to lead his forces, recognizing their skill and dedication above all else. He also established a postal relay system, the YAM, with stations providing fresh horses and provisions, allowing for rapid communication across his burgeoning empire. This network, initially for military and administrative purposes, would later facilitate trade and intelligence gathering, shrinking the vast distances of the steppe. The world had changed. The scattered tribes of the steppe, once a collection of independent entities, were now a single, formidable power. The transformation from Temujin, the young chieftain, to Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, was complete. It was a journey marked by immense hardship, strategic brilliance, and an unyielding will. The unification of the steppe, a feat previously deemed impossible, was not merely a military triumph. It was a societal revolution, laying the groundwork for an empire that would soon reshape the entire known world. The wind still whispered across the plains, but now it carried the name of Genghis Khan, a name that would soon be spoken in awe and fear. From the furthest reaches of the east to the distant lands of the west, the foundation was laid, the unified force was ready, and the vast, unknown world lay before them, ripe for exploration and perhaps for conquest. The wind, once a wild companion to scattered tribes, now carried the unified roar of a nascent empire. Genghis Khan, the Temujin of old, had not merely united the Mongols, he had forged them into a weapon unlike any the world had ever seen. His genius lay not just in his ferocity, but in his profound understanding of human nature, military strategy, and the very landscape upon which his destiny unfolded. He recognized that the traditional nomadic way of life, while fostering hardy warriors, also bred disunity. Clans fought clans, loyalty shifted like desert sands, and true collective power remained elusive. To overcome this, he dismantled the old tribal structures, replacing them with a meticulously organized military hierarchy that transcended ancient allegiances. At its heart, the Mongol army was a decimal system. 10 men formed an arban, 10 arbans, a jagan, a company of 100, 10 jagans, a minghan, a battalion of 1,000, and 10 minghans, a tumen, a division of 10,000. This seemingly simple structure was revolutionary. It meant that a warrior's loyalty was no longer to his clan chief, but to his immediate commander, and ultimately to the great Khan himself. Merit, not birthright, became the sole determinant of advancement. A common foot soldier, if skilled and loyal, could rise through the ranks, even to the command of a tumen. This meritocracy instilled fierce loyalty and ambition, ensuring that the most capable led, and that every man knew his place and purpose within the vast, intricate machine. The very essence of Mongol warfare was speed and discipline. Their cavalry, often numbering in the tens of thousands, moved with astonishing swiftness across vast distances, covering perhaps 60 to 70 miles a day, a pace that left their more heavily armored, slower opponents bewildered and exhausted. Each warrior typically rode multiple horses, sometimes as many as 4 or 5, allowing them to switch mounts frequently and maintain their blistering pace without tiring their animals. This unique logistical advantage meant they could appear seemingly out of nowhere, strike and vanish before a proper defense could be mounted. Their saddles were light, their stirrups strong, allowing them to stand and fire their composite bows with devastating accuracy while galloping at full speed. These bows, made from layers of horn, wood, and sinew, were powerful instruments, capable of piercing armor at considerable range. A single Mongol warrior could carry quivers holding 60 or more arrows, each designed for a specific purpose, some for long range, others for close-quarter penetration. Beyond their individual prowess, it was their collective tactics that truly set them apart. The Mongols perfected the art of the feigned retreat, a deceptive maneuver that lured pursuing enemies into ambushes where they would be encircled and annihilated by waiting flanks. The tulugma, or horn formation, was another signature tactic where the army would spread out like the horns of a crescent, enveloping the enemy from multiple directions. Communication was key. Flags and smoke signals conveyed orders across the vast battlefields, allowing for complex, coordinated maneuvers. Discipline was absolute. Any soldier who fled from battle or whose unit retreated without orders faced immediate execution, often along with his entire arban. This brutal enforcement ensured that fear of the Khan outweighed fear of the enemy, creating an unshakable resolve. Intelligence gathering was another cornerstone of Genghis Khan's military genius. Before any major campaign, scouts and spies would be dispatched, sometimes years in advance, to map terrain, assess enemy strengths and weaknesses, identify supply routes, and even sow discord among the local populace. They understood that knowledge was power, and they sought to know their enemies better than those enemies knew themselves. This meticulous preparation minimized surprises and allowed them to exploit every vulnerability. For instance, before their campaigns into Central Asia and Persia, they gathered detailed information on the sophisticated irrigation systems of the Khwarezmian Empire, which they would later strategically destroy, turning fertile lands into barren wastes and crippling the enemy's ability to sustain itself. Siegecraft, initially a weakness for the nomadic Mongols, quickly became a formidable strength. Recognizing that many of their targets were fortified cities, Genghis Khan began incorporating engineers and specialists from conquered lands into his army. Chinese siege engineers, with their knowledge of catapults, trebuchets, and sophisticated wall-breaching techniques, became invaluable assets. They learned to construct massive siege engines on site, often using timber from nearby forests. They even employed psychological warfare, sometimes launching the heads of their victims or diseased corpses over city walls to spread terror and plague. The Mongols were pragmatic. If a city surrendered without resistance, its inhabitants might be spared. But if it dared to defy them, the consequences were often catastrophic, serving as a chilling warning to others. The fall of cities like Samarkand and Bokhara, once vibrant centers of learning and trade, became grim testaments to the Mongols' imperialists' terrifying efficiency and their policy of absolute submission or utter destruction. Historians still debate the exact figures, but it is believed that the Mongol army, at its peak under Genghis Khan, likely numbered between 100,000 and 150,000 warriors. While this might seem modest compared to the vast armies of some settled empires, their unparalleled mobility, discipline, and strategic brilliance allowed them to defeat forces many times their size. This relatively smaller, yet overwhelmingly effective force was a testament to the quality over quantity principle. The integration of disparate elements into a cohesive whole was perhaps Genghis Khan's most remarkable feat. He didn't just conquer, he absorbed. Skilled artisans, scholars, and engineers from conquered lands were not simply enslaved, but often pressed into service, their knowledge and talents enriching the Mongol war machine and administration. This pragmatic approach allowed the Mongols to rapidly assimilate technologies and administrative practices that they themselves lacked, transforming their raw military might into a more sophisticated instrument of empire building. Perhaps one of the lesser-known details of their logistics was the YAM system, an elaborate postal relay network. This system, established across their vast domains, allowed messages and official decrees to travel with incredible speed. Riders, often on fresh horses, would carry dispatches from one station to the next, sometimes covering hundreds of miles in a single day. This network was not just for communication. It also facilitated the movement of goods and intelligence, binding the nascent empire together and allowing the Great Khan to maintain control over his far-flung commanders and territories. It was an early form of imperial infrastructure, as vital to their expansion as their cavalry. The transformation of disparate, often feuding, nomadic clans into this unstoppable military force was a process of relentless discipline, innovation, and unwavering vision. Genghis Khan understood that true power lay not in brute strength alone, but in organization, unity of purpose, and the relentless pursuit of an objective. He had taken the raw, untamed spirit of the steppe and channeled it into a force that would reshape the map of the world, leaving an indelible mark on history that echoed across continents and through centuries. The wind, which once carried the cries of skirmishes, now whispered the legend of the Khan, a legend etched in the dust of countless hooves and the memory of empires brought to their knees. The winds that had once carried the whispers of tribal unity across the steppe now seemed to shift, carrying a different scent, the scent of ambition, of an empire stretching beyond the familiar horizon. Genghis Khan, having forged a formidable nation from disparate clans, turned his gaze southward, towards the sprawling, sophisticated, and seemingly impregnable realms of northern China. This was a land vastly different from the nomadic world he knew, a realm of walled cities, intricate bureaucracies, and a population that dwarfed anything the Mongols had ever encountered. His primary target was the Jin dynasty, a powerful state ruled by the Jurchens, who had themselves conquered much of northern China from the Song dynasty in the early 12th century. The Jin, with their vast armies and formidable fortifications, represented the greatest challenge yet to the burgeoning Mongol power. The initial campaigns, beginning around 1211, were not merely a series of battles. They were a profound lesson for the Mongols in a new kind of warfare. The steppe warriors, masters of cavalry charges and swift maneuvers, found themselves confronted by immense, heavily fortified cities. These were not the temporary encampments of rival tribes, but structures of stone and earth, designed to withstand prolonged sieges. The early encounters were often characterized by the Mongols' attempts to lure the Jin armies out into open battle where their cavalry could be used to devastating effect. When this failed, they resorted to their traditional tactics of raiding and devastating the countryside, cutting off supplies to the cities and sowing chaos. Yet the sheer scale of the Jin defenses demanded a different approach. One of the most striking aspects of this period was the Mongols' remarkable adaptability. They were not merely destructive forces. They were keen observers and rapid learners, confronted by the need for siege engines, a technology largely alien to their nomadic heritage. They began to incorporate engineers and artisans from conquered territories. Chinese and Jurchen engineers, skilled in the construction of trebuchets, catapults, and other siege weaponry, were pressed into service. It's said that Genghis Khan himself would often observe these new technologies with intense curiosity, understanding their critical role in overcoming the Jin's defenses. This pragmatic assimilation of foreign expertise was a hallmark of the Mongol expansion, transforming their military from a purely cavalry-based force into a multifaceted war machine capable of tackling diverse challenges. The siege of Zhongdu, the Jin capital, modern-day Beijing, which began in 1213, epitomized this evolving warfare. Zhongdu was a city of immense size and strength, protected by towering walls and a vast garrison. The Mongols initially tried to starve the city, cutting off its supply lines. However, the sheer resilience of the Jin, coupled with the city's immense stores, meant that a direct assault was eventually necessary. This was where the newly acquired siege technologies came into play. Trebuchets hurled massive stones and even incendiary materials over the walls, while sappers dug tunnels beneath them, aiming to collapse sections of the fortifications. The scale of the effort was immense, involving thousands of laborers and engineers working under the watchful eyes of Mongol commanders. Historians still debate the precise extent to which the Mongols themselves understood the intricate mechanics of these machines versus their reliance on captured specialists. Some argue that while the Mongols were brilliant strategists and tacticians, their technical knowledge remained limited, and they simply commanded the experts. Others suggest that the Mongol leadership, including Genghis Khan and his generals, developed a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of siege warfare principles, quickly grasping the strengths and weaknesses of different approaches. What is undeniable, is that they effectively deployed these tools, demonstrating a strategic flexibility rarely seen in military history. The fall of Zhongdu in 1215, after a prolonged and brutal siege, marked a turning point. The Jin emperor had already fled south, but the capture of the capital was a symbolic and practical victory of immense proportions. The city was plundered, and its vast wealth, accumulated over centuries, flowed into Mongol coffers. More importantly, the Mongols gained access to even more advanced technologies and a deeper understanding of Chinese administrative practices. They began to recruit Chinese scholars, administrators, and even defecting Jin generals, integrating them into their burgeoning empire. This wasn't merely about brute force, it was about absorbing and utilizing the strengths of the conquered. The campaigns against the Jin were not a continuous, unbroken series of victories. The Jin, though weakened, were a formidable adversary, and they often mounted fierce resistance. There were instances where Mongol forces faced significant setbacks, and the war dragged on for years, even decades, extending beyond Genghis Khan's lifetime. However, the initial phase, led by Genghis himself, laid the groundwork for the eventual conquest. He systematically dismantled the Jin's northern defenses, ravaged their agricultural heartland, and crippled their ability to wage effective war. One lesser-known detail from these campaigns reveals the Mongols' psychological warfare tactics. During one siege, facing stubborn resistance, Genghis Khan reportedly offered the besieged city a truce, promising to spare their lives if they surrendered. When the gates were opened, he ordered his troops to enter, but instead of slaughtering the inhabitants, he commanded them to round up all the skilled artisans, engineers, and scholars. These individuals were then sent back to Mongolia, where their talents could be put to use for the empire. The remaining population was spared, but the message was clear. Resistance was futile, and surrender, while not without its consequences, offered a path to survival, especially for those with valuable skills. This selective mercy, combined with widespread terror, was a powerful tool in their arsenal. The conquest of northern China also forced the Mongols to adapt their logistical capabilities. Sustaining large armies far from their traditional grazing lands required meticulous planning for supplies, fodder, and reinforcements. They began to establish relay stations and develop more sophisticated supply chains, drawing upon the existing infrastructure of the conquered territories. This was a far cry from the self-sufficient raiding parties of the early steppe campaigns. The sheer scale of the operations in China demanded a level of organization that was unprecedented for a nomadic power. The Jin dynasty, though resilient, was ultimately unable to withstand the relentless Mongol pressure. Their centralized command structure, once a strength, became a vulnerability when faced with the Mongols' decentralized yet coordinated attacks. Their reliance on fixed fortifications, while initially effective, proved to be a double-edged sword as the Mongols mastered siege warfare. The war against the Jin was a long, attritional struggle that consumed vast resources and manpower on both sides. Yet for the Mongols, it was a crucible that forged their military into an even more potent force, capable of projecting power across vast distances and against diverse enemies. Perhaps these walls, now crumbling remnants of a forgotten empire, whispered stories to the stars of the clanging of siege engines, the shouts of warriors, and the desperate prayers of a besieged populace. They bore witness to the profound shift in military power, from the established order of sophisticated empires to the ascendant might of a nomadic people who had learned to master the tools of their adversaries. The campaigns in northern China were not just about territorial expansion. They were about the transformation of the Mongol War Machine, the integration of new technologies and peoples, and the laying of the administrative groundwork for an empire that would soon stretch across the known world. The lessons learned, the skills acquired, and the resources gained from the Jin campaigns would prove invaluable as Genghis Khan and his successors turned their attention to even grander conquests, demonstrating that true power lay not just in strength, but in the ability to adapt, to learn, and to integrate. The path to a global empire was paved, in part, with the stones of the Jin cities. The whispers of the wind, carrying tales from the distant steppe, began to shift, growing colder, more ominous, as the Mongol Empire, now a unified and formidable entity, cast its gaze westward. Genghis Khan, having forged a nation from disparate tribes, understood that true power lay not just in conquest, but in the control of vital trade routes and the acquisition of wealth that flowed along them. To the west lay the vast and powerful Khwarezmian Empire, a realm of immense riches and a strategic crossroads for the Silk Road. Its lands stretched across Central Asia, encompassing fertile oases, bustling cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, and a sophisticated network of trade that linked east and west. The Khwarezmian Empire, under Sultan Muhammad II, was a successor state to the Seljuk Empire, and at its height represented a formidable power in the Islamic world. Its armies were large, its cities well fortified, and its cultural achievements significant. Yet beneath this veneer of strength, internal divisions simmered. Sultan Muhammad, though ambitious, was often described as indecisive and prone to fits of paranoia, alienating many of his own commanders and nobles. This internal fragility would prove to be a fatal flaw when confronted by the disciplined and relentless Mongol war machine. Genghis Khan, ever pragmatic, initially sought to establish peaceful trade relations with the Khwarezmian Empire. He understood the mutual benefits that could arise from open commerce. In 1218, he dispatched a large caravan laden with gold, silver, silk, and other valuable goods, along with a retinue of 450 merchants and an envoy, to the city of Otrar, a key Khwarezmian frontier post. This was not merely a trade mission. It was also a diplomatic overture, a test of the Khwarezmian Sultan's intentions. Genghis Khan sent a message to Sultan Muhammad, stating, "I am the sovereign of the lands of the rising sun, while you are the sultan of those of the setting sun. Let us conclude a firm treaty of friendship and peace." However, the governor of Otrar, Inalchuk, a relative of Sultan Muhammad's mother, harbored suspicions. Perhaps he saw the rich caravan as an easy target. Or perhaps he genuinely believed the merchants were Mongol spies. Whatever his true motivations, Inalchuk seized the caravan, confiscated its goods, and, most heinously, executed the entire retinue of merchants and the Mongol envoy. Only one camel driver managed to escape the massacre and make the arduous journey back to Mongol territory, bearing the horrific news to Genghis Khan. This act was not merely a crime, it was an unforgivable insult, a blatant violation of diplomatic immunity, and a direct challenge to Genghis Khan's authority and honor. For the Mongols, who held the sanctity of envoys in the highest regard, this was an act of war. Genghis Khan, known for his self-control, was reportedly enraged beyond measure. He is said to have climbed a sacred mountain, likely Burkhan Khaldun, and prayed for 3 days, seeking divine guidance and strength for the retribution he was about to unleash. The Khwarezmian Cataclysm was about to begin. Genghis Khan meticulously planned his campaign, demonstrating his strategic genius. He gathered his vast armies, estimated to be between 100,000 and 200,000 warriors, though some historical accounts inflate these numbers. What is certain is that it was an immense force, highly mobile, disciplined, and utterly ruthless. The Mongol strategy was not simply to conquer, but to dismantle the Khwarezmian state, to remove it as a threat, and to secure the lucrative trade routes. In 1219, the Mongol invasion began. Unlike previous campaigns, this was not a gradual expansion, but a swift, devastating surge. The Mongols moved with astonishing speed, crossing vast distances of desert and steppe, bypassing fortifications, and striking where least expected. Their tactics were honed over decades of warfare, feigned retreats, encirclement, psychologic, warfare, and the systematic destruction of any resistance. The first major target was Otrar, the city where the fateful massacre had occurred. The siege of Otrar lasted for 5 months, a testament to its strong defenses and the determination of its defenders. However, the Mongols, employing siege engines and relentless assaults, eventually breached the walls. The city was sacked, and Inalchuk was captured. According to some accounts, he was executed by having molten silver poured into his eyes and ears, a gruesome but symbolic punishment for his greed and betrayal. This act sent a chilling message across the Khwarezmian Empire. The Mongols were coming, and their vengeance would be absolute. From Otrar, the Mongol armies fanned out, striking at the heart of the Khwarezmian Empire. Sultan Muhammad, instead of consolidating his forces and facing the Mongols in a decisive battle, made a series of disastrous strategic errors. He dispersed his large army across various cities, hoping to defend each one individually, rather than concentrating them for a unified defense. This fragmented approach played directly into the Mongols' hands, allowing them to defeat the Khwarezmian forces piecemeal. Bukhara, a renowned center of Islamic learning and culture, was next. The Mongols, led by Genghis Khan himself, arrived swiftly. The city's garrison, under the command of a Khwarezmian general, attempted a sortie but was routed. The citizens, seeing the futility of resistance, opened the gates. Genghis Khan entered Bukhara and, according to contemporary accounts, rode his horse into the city's grand mosque, ordering the holy books to be thrown out and the building to be used as stables. This act, whether literal or symbolic, was a profound desecration, a deliberate assault on the religious and cultural identity of the conquered people, designed to instill terror and break their spirit. While Bukhara was spared complete destruction for a time, its scholars and artisans were often deported to Mongolia, their skills repurposed for the growing empire. The common people were either massacred or enslaved. The city was eventually burned. Samarkand, the capital of the Khwarezmian Empire, was the next major target. It was a magnificent city, famed for its intricate tilework, grand mosques, and thriving bazaars. Sultan Muhammad had fortified it heavily, believing it to be impregnable. However, the Mongol siege was relentless. The city's outer defenses were quickly overwhelmed. Internal dissent and panic among the defenders led to its downfall. Many of the city's inhabitants, terrified by the tales of Mongol brutality, surrendered. Those who resisted faced a horrific fate. The city was largely destroyed, its architectural marvels reduced to rubble, and its population decimated. As the Mongols swept through the Khwarezmian heartland, Sultan Muhammad II fled westward, pursued relentlessly by Mongol detachments. He was a king without a kingdom, constantly on the run, his once mighty empire crumbling around him. He eventually sought refuge on an island in the Caspian Sea, where he died a lonely and pathetic death in 1221, reportedly of pleurisy, leaving his son, Jalaluddin Mingburnu, to pick up the pieces. Jalaluddin, unlike his father, was a courageous and capable military leader. He gathered what remained of the Khwarezmian forces and attempted to resist the Mongol onslaught, achieving a few minor victories, most notably at the Battle of Parwan. However, these were isolated successes against an overwhelming tide. Genghis Khan, recognizing Jalaluddin as a persistent threat, personally pursued him. The final decisive confrontation occurred at the Battle of the Indus River in 1221. Jalaluddin's army was cornered against the river, and after a valiant but futile struggle, he famously rode his horse into the fast-flowing waters of the Indus, escaping across to India, leaving his family and remaining forces to the mercy of the Mongols. The Khwarezmian campaign was a turning point in world history. It demonstrated the unprecedented military efficiency and destructive power of the Mongol Empire. The speed of their advance, the coordination of their armies, and the thoroughness of their destruction shocked the known world. Cities that had flourished for centuries were reduced to ruins, their populations slaughtered or enslaved. The irrigation systems that sustained life in the arid regions of Central Asia were often deliberately destroyed, turning fertile lands back into desert, a scar that would take centuries to heal. Historians still disagree whether the scale of the destruction was a deliberate policy of terror or a consequence of the Mongols' brutal efficiency and the resistance they encountered. While some argue that the Mongols aimed for complete annihilation to prevent future rebellions, others suggest that the widespread destruction was often a byproduct of prolonged sieges and the fierce resistance of the Khwarezmian cities. What is undeniable is the demographic and cultural catastrophe that befell Central Asia. Millions perished, and the region's vibrant Islamic civilization suffered a profound setback from which it would not fully recover for generations. The Mongol conquest of Khwarezmim also opened up the path for further Mongol expansion into the Middle East and Eastern Europe. The intelligence gathered during this campaign, the knowledge of the geography and political landscape, would prove invaluable for later invasions. The campaign also cemented Genghis Khan's reputation as an unstoppable force, a divine scourge sent to punish the wicked. Tales of his ferocity spread like wildfire, striking fear into the hearts of rulers across Eurasia. After the destruction of Khwarezmim, Genghis Khan did not immediately return to Mongolia. He spent several years in Central Asia, consolidating his gains, hunting, and planning for the future. He dispatched forces under his generals Jebe and Subutai on a legendary reconnaissance in force, a daring raid that would take them across the Caucasus Mountains, around the Caspian Sea, and into the steppes of Russia, where they defeated a combined Rus and Cuman army at the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223. This expedition, though a reconnaissance, served as a chilling preview of the Mongol invasions that would follow decades later. The Khwarezmian Cataclysm was more than just a military campaign. It was a profound shift in the global balance of power. The fall of this mighty empire removed a significant barrier between the Mongol Empire and the Islamic world to the west, setting the stage for future conquests. It also showcased the devastating effectiveness of the Mongol military machine, a force unlike any seen before, capable of projecting power across vast distances and dismantling established empires with terrifying speed and thoroughness. The echoes of the cries from the burning cities of Khwarezmian would linger in the air, carried by the wind, a somber testament to the wrath of the Khan. The dust of Khwarezm, still settling over the ruins of its cities, marked not an end, but a new beginning for the Mongol advance. With the Shah's empire shattered, the Golden Horde, now a torrent, flowed further west, its momentum unchecked. Genghis Khan, ever the strategist, understood that a fragmented enemy was still an enemy, and the vast territories beyond the Amu Darya, stretching into Persia and the Caucasus, held a myriad of smaller states, principalities, and powerful cities that could potentially coalesce into a new threat. His vision was not merely to conquer, but to integrate, to weave these disparate lands into the tapestry of his burgeoning empire. The initial thrust into Persia, following the Khwarezmian collapse around 1221, was less a single sweeping invasion and more a series of calculated campaigns led by his most trusted generals, Gebbi and Subutai. These two, legendary for their speed and tactical brilliance, had already embarked on an extraordinary reconnaissance in force, a deep raid that would become one of the most audacious military maneuvers in history. While Genghis Khan himself consolidated his grip on the newly conquered Khwarezmian heartlands, ensuring the loyalty of new vassals and organizing administration, Gebbi and Subutai were already far to the west, their horses' hooves echoing across the Iranian plateau. Their journey was a whirlwind of strategic strikes and cunning feints. They bypassed heavily fortified cities when necessary, choosing instead to isolate and then overwhelm key strongholds. They moved with such rapidity that local rulers often heard of their approach only as the Mongol vanguard appeared on the horizon. Towns like Rai, a magnificent ancient city near modern-day Tehran, fell to their might, its libraries and markets, once bustling with scholars and merchants, silenced by the Mongol fury. The conquest was brutal, a stark message to any who might consider resistance. Yet, even in the midst of destruction, there was a calculated purpose: to break the will of the local populace and to gather intelligence on the lands beyond. The Mongol forces, having swept through northern Persia, then turned northwards, a move that surprised many. Instead of continuing west towards Baghdad, the spiritual heart of the Islamic world, Gebbi and Subutai led their Tumans through the Caucasus Mountains, a formidable natural barrier. This decision, perhaps influenced by their desire to scout the northern flanks of the Islamic world and to avoid a direct confrontation with the powerful Abbasid Caliphate at this stage, led them into Georgia and Azerbaijan. The Georgian kingdom, a rising Christian power in the region, found itself directly in the path of the Mongol storm. In 1221, at the Battle of Kunani, the combined Georgian and Armenian forces were decisively defeated by the Mongol vanguard. The scale of the Mongol victory was so complete that it sent shockwaves across the region, demonstrating their military prowess not just against the Muslim world, but against Christian kingdoms as well. The tactics employed by Gebei and Subutai during this extraordinary expedition were a masterclass in deception and maneuver. They would often feign retreat, drawing their enemies into ambushes, or split their forces, only to converge unexpectedly. Their intelligence gathering was meticulous, relying on captured locals, merchants, and even spies to map out terrain, understand local politics, and assess enemy strengths. It's said that during this period, they would often send small, fast-moving detachments far ahead of the main army, not to engage, but simply to observe and report, like scouts in a vast, unknown wilderness. This allowed them to anticipate enemy movements and choose the most advantageous ground for battle. Historians still disagree whether this incredible circumnavigation of the Caspian Sea, culminating in the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223, was merely an extended reconnaissance mission or a deliberate, though unapproved, independent campaign by Gebei and Subutai. Some argue that Genghis Khan, while aware of their general direction, did not explicitly order them to venture as far as the Russian steppes and engage the Rus princes. Others contend that Genghis, ever the grand strategist, saw the value in such a deep probe, understanding that knowledge of the lands beyond his immediate conquests was crucial for future expansion or defense. Regardless, this expedition, covering thousands of miles and engaging numerous diverse peoples, solidified the Mongol reputation as an unstoppable force, capable of striking anywhere, anytime. While Gebei and Subutai were charting new territories, Genghis Khan was meticulously organizing the newly conquered lands of Khwarezm. He understood that conquest was only the first step. True power lay in effective governance. He established a system of Mongol governors, or darugachis, in key cities, often supported by local administrators who had shown loyalty or proven their competence. The famous Yasa, the Mongol legal code, was introduced, providing a framework for justice and order, albeit a harsh one. Trade routes, once disrupted by war, were slowly reopened, and merchants, though wary, began to see the potential for profit under Mongol rule, as the Pax Mongolica, though born of violence, promised a degree of stability across vast distances. One lesser-known detail from this period is the Mongol use of captured engineers and artisans. After the fall of cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, instead of simply slaughtering everyone, the Mongols often spared skilled individuals, engineers, architects, siege weapon specialists, and even scribes, and forcibly relocated them to Karakorum, the Mongol capital, or to other strategic locations. These individuals were then put to work, contributing their knowledge and skills to the Mongol war machine and administrative apparatus. This pragmatic approach, though brutal in its execution, allowed the Mongols to rapidly assimilate advanced technologies and administrative practices from the civilizations they conquered, accelerating their own development and further enhancing their military capabilities. Imagine the quiet despair of a Persian architect, forced to design siege engines for his conquerors. Or a Chinese scholar, tasked with mapping the very lands his people once traded with. The long-term impact of the Khwarezmian campaign and the subsequent push into Persia was profound. It marked the definitive end of the Khwarezmian Shahdom and fundamentally reshaped the political landscape of Central Asia and the Middle East. The Mongol presence became a permanent fixture, leading to the eventual establishment of the Ilkhanate, one of the four successor khanates of the Mongol Empire. This period also saw the further refinement of Mongol military doctrine. The campaigns in Persia, with their diverse terrains ranging from arid deserts to rugged mountains, and their encounters with varied fighting styles, from heavily armored cavalry to disciplined infantry, forced the Mongols to adapt and innovate. Their ability to integrate siege warfare techniques, learned from the Chinese and perfected against Persian cities, became a crucial element of their success. As Genghis Khan solidified his western flank, his thoughts increasingly turned east, towards his homeland and the future of his empire. The vastness of his conquests, stretching from the Yellow Sea to the Caspian, was unprecedented. He had achieved what no conqueror before him had, forging an empire of unparalleled scale through sheer will, military genius, and the unwavering loyalty of his generals. Yet, the burden of governance, the sheer logistical challenge of maintaining control over such diverse and distant lands, must have weighed heavily. He understood that his legacy would not just be defined by conquest, but by the structures he left behind. The years following the Khwarezmian campaign era period of intense consolidation and planning for Genghis Khan. While his generals continued their campaigns, he focused on administrative reforms, ensuring the efficient collection of tribute, the maintenance of the postal relay system, and the training of new generations of Mongol warriors. He also paid close attention to the succession, a critical concern for any vast empire. He had 4 principal sons, Jochi, Chagatai, Ogedei, and Tolui, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, and the question of who would inherit the mantle of Great Khan was a constant undercurrent. This internal dynamic, often fraught with tension, would shape the future trajectory of the Mongol Empire long after Genghis Khan himself was gone. The stories of Mongol brutality during this period are numerous and chilling, yet interwoven with these accounts are glimpses of a surprisingly sophisticated administrative and logistical machine. The Mongols were not simply raiders, they were empire builders, albeit ones who built upon the ashes of what came before. They understood the importance of infrastructure, communication, and intelligence. The fear they inspired was a tool, but so too was the promise of stability, the free flow of goods along the reopened Silk Roads, and the imposition of a common law, however harsh. Perhaps these winds, sweeping across the Persian plains, still carry echoes of the Mongol horsemen, their banners snapping in the sun, their cries echoing across ancient ruins. Perhaps the very dust of the Amu Darya holds the memory of their passage, a testament to an ambition that knew no bounds. The world had been irrevocably altered, the centers of power shifted, and a new global order was slowly, painfully, being born from the crucible of Mongol conquest. Genghis Khan, now at the zenith of his power, stood at the heart of this transformation, a figure of awe and terror, his name etched into the very fabric of history. His empire, forged in fire and iron, was now a living, breathing entity, stretching its vast limbs across continents, forever changing the course of human civilization. The sun, setting over the western horizons of Persia, cast long shadows, hinting at the vastness yet to be explored and the challenges yet to be faced by the Mongol Empire. The dust of conquest began to settle, revealing not merely a landscape scarred by conflict, but one subtly reshaped by a new order. Genghis Khan, the fierce warrior, now turned his gaze from the battlefield to the intricacies of governance, understanding that true power lay not just in taking, but in building. He envisioned an empire that would endure beyond his lifetime, a vast tapestry woven with threads of law, trade, and administration. One of his most profound legacies, often overshadowed by his military prowess, was the establishment of the Yasa, a secret written code of law. While its exact contents have been lost to time, and historians still debate whether it was a static document or a collection of evolving decrees. Its principles permeated every corner of the burgeoning Mongol dominion. The Yasa codified customs, regulated daily life, and sought to impose a universal standard of conduct across diverse tribes and conquered peoples. It emphasized discipline, loyalty, and the supremacy of the Khan's will, but also protected certain rights, particularly those related to religious freedom and the sanctity of envoys. For instance, theft was punishable by death, as was lying, particularly to a Mongol official. This strict adherence to order, enforced with swift and often brutal efficiency, brought a surprising degree of stability to territories that had long known only chaos. Imagine the awe, or perhaps the quiet fear, of a merchant traversing the Silk Road, knowing that even in the most remote outposts, the Yasa's reach extended, offering a strange blend of protection and peril. Beyond the internal structuring of his empire, Genghis Khan recognized the vital role of trade. The Silk Road, that ancient network of arteries connecting east and west, had often been a dangerous thoroughfare, plagued by bandits and fragmented by warring factions. Under Mongol rule, however, a new era of relative peace descended upon these routes. The Mongols actively encouraged trade, understanding that prosperity fueled their empire. They established a sophisticated postal relay system, the Yam, which not only facilitated rapid communication across vast distances, but also provided secure lodging and fresh horses for merchants and envoys. This infrastructure, far more advanced than anything seen in the region before, dramatically reduced travel times and risks. Caravans laden with silk, spices, porcelain, and precious metals moved with an unprecedented freedom, their passage protected by Mongol patrols. Perhaps the most striking example of this newfound security was the tale, possibly apocryphal but widely believed, of a virgin maiden carrying a sack of gold, traversing the entire Silk Road unharmed under Mongol protection. This era, sometimes referred to as the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, fostered an astonishing exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies between distant civilizations. Chinese gunpowder, printing techniques, and compasses flowed westward, while European medical knowledge and architectural styles found their way eastward, enriching cultures across the Eurasian landmass. The administration of such a vast and diverse empire presented challenges unlike any faced by previous nomadic conquerors. Genghis Khan, though a military genius, was also a pragmatist. He understood the limitations of a purely tribal structure and began to incorporate elements from the settled societies he had conquered. He brought in skilled administrators from various cultures, Uyghur scribes, Khitan engineers, Chinese scholars, valuing their expertise above their ethnic origin. This meritocratic approach, revolutionary for its time, allowed for the development of a more sophisticated bureaucracy. Taxation systems were standardized, census records were meticulously kept, and a common currency, often paper money in the later stages, began to circulate. This laid the groundwork for the more elaborate administrative systems that would flourish under his successors, particularly his son, Ogedei Khan. It was a slow, arduous process, often met with resistance from traditional tribal leaders who clung to their ancient customs. Genghis Khan, however, possessed an unyielding will and a remarkable ability to adapt. He was a man who, despite his humble origins, understood the complexities of governing a world that stretched from the steppes of Mongolia to the borders of Europe and beyond. Yet, even for a leader of Genghis Khan's stature, internal challenges persisted. The very nature of a nomadic confederation, built on personal loyalty and the promise of plunder, was inherently fluid. The vast distances and diverse peoples under his sway made centralized control a constant struggle. There were whispers of discontent, particularly among those who felt their traditional ways were being eroded by the Yasa or by the increasing power of the central administration. The distribution of conquered lands and wealth, though meticulously planned, often led to simmering rivalries among his generals and even his own sons. The vastness of the empire, while a testament to his ambition, also became its inherent vulnerability. Maintaining cohesion across such disparate regions, each with its own customs, languages, and allegiances, required constant vigilance and an iron will. One lesser-known detail of this period is the ongoing challenge of integrating the various conquered peoples into the Mongol military. While many were conscripted, their loyalty was often tenuous, and they frequently required close supervision by Mongol officers. This created a complex command structure where the Mongol elite formed the core, but a significant portion of the army was composed of diverse, sometimes reluctant auxiliaries. Genghis Khan also faced the inevitable challenge of succession. Unlike many settled empires with clear rules of primogeniture, a Mongol tradition of collective rule and the division of the patrimony among sons created a potential for fragmentation. While he designated Ogedei as his successor, a decision carefully considered and presented to the Kurultai, or Great Assembly, the seeds of future disputes were already sown. His other sons, Jochi, Chagatai, and Tolui, each received their own appanages or territories, laying the foundation for the four great khanates that would emerge after his death. This system, while intended to maintain family unity and prevent outright civil war, ultimately led to the gradual decentralization of the empire as each khanate developed its own distinct identity and interests. Despite these inherent challenges, Genghis Khan's organizational genius was undeniable. He didn't just conquer, he built. He didn't just destroy, he laid foundations. The enduring structure of the Mongol Empire, which would continue to expand and influence global history for centuries after his passing, was a direct testament to his foresight and administrative acumen. His focus on infrastructure, legal reform, and the fostering of trade created a legacy that transcended mere military might. He transformed a collection of warring tribes into a unified, albeit vast and complex, political entity. The Silk Road, once a dangerous patchwork, became a conduit for an unprecedented flow of knowledge, goods, and people, fostering a cultural exchange that profoundly shaped the medieval world. Perhaps these laws, these trade routes, these administrative systems whispered stories to the stars, echoing the ambition of a man who sought to bring order to a chaotic world, and in doing so, forever changed its course. His vision extended beyond the immediate spoils of war. It reached for the very horizon of possibility, seeking to forge a lasting dominion that would echo through the annals of time. The wind, a constant companion throughout his life, now carried the scent of autumn leaves and distant smoke across the plains. Genghis Khan, the unifier of the steppe, the architect of an empire vast beyond imagining, was approaching his final campaign. His gaze, still sharp, fixed upon the lands of the Tanguts, the Western Shia dynasty, whose defiance had long pricked at his strategic patience. This was not merely another conquest. It was a reckoning, a deliberate act to secure the very foundations of the empire he had so painstakingly built. The Tanguts, nestled in the fertile valleys and arid plateaus of what is now northwestern China, had once pledged allegiance to the Mongols, offering tribute and military aid. But their loyalty had wavered, their tribute grown sporadic, and their refusal to commit troops to the ongoing war against the Khwarezmian Empire had been a profound insult, a challenge to the Khan's supreme authority. This final campaign, launched in 1226, was meticulously planned, a testament to the Khan's enduring strategic brilliance even in his advanced years. He was in his early 60s, an age when most rulers of his time were content to govern from their palaces. Yet he rode at the head of his army, enduring the harsh elements, sharing the privations of his soldiers. The Tangut capital, Yinchuan, was the ultimate prize. But first, the surrounding territories had to be subdued, their resources seized, their strongholds dismantled. City after city fell before the relentless Mongol advance. Ganzhou, Suzhou, Xiliang. The scorched earth policy, refined over decades of warfare, was once again employed, leaving little behind for the defenders to rally around. The Tangut Emperor, Li Xian, found himself increasingly isolated, his pleas for aid from the Jin dynasty falling on deaf ears. The Jin, themselves weakened by years of Mongol pressure and internal strife, were in no position to intervene, effectively sealing the Tangut's fate. Yet, even amidst this final, decisive push, a shadow began to fall over the Great Khan. The exact circumstances of his death remained shrouded in a degree of historical mystery, a testament to the Mongol desire to protect the sacredness of their leader's passing. The official Mongol account, found in the secret history of the Mongols, states simply that he died in the 6th month of the Year of the Pig, 1227, while campaigning against the Tanguts. However, other accounts, particularly those from Persian and Chinese chroniclers, offer more specific, though varying details. One widely circulated story suggests he fell from his horse while hunting wild asses, sustaining internal injuries that proved fatal. Another speaks of an arrow wound received during a siege, or even a sudden illness brought on by the harsh campaigning conditions. Historians still debate the precise cause, perhaps because the Mongols, deeply superstitious, sought to control the narrative of their revered leader's demise, ensuring it reflected his strength rather than any vulnerability. Regardless of the exact trigger, it is clear that his end came during this final, triumphant campaign, a warrior's death on the field of battle, or at least, in its immediate vicinity. As his life ebbed away, Genghis Khan's thoughts were not solely on conquest, but on the future of the vast dominion he had forged. He understood that the greatest challenge to any empire was not its external enemies, but its internal divisions. His sons, while capable, possessed strong individual ambitions, and the vastness of the empire demanded a clear line of succession, a defined structure to prevent its fragmentation. He had long before established the Yasa, his great law code, a comprehensive set of decrees that governed everything from military organization to social conduct, designed to bind his diverse peoples together. But the ultimate preservation of the empire lay in the hands of his heirs. It was in these final months, perhaps even that he solidified his succession plan, a testament to his foresight and pragmatism. He had 4 principal sons by his first and chief wife, Berte, Jochi, Chagatai, Ugade, and Tolui. Each had proven their military prowess and administrative capabilities, yet each also possessed distinct personalities and strengths. Jochi, the eldest, had a strained relationship with his brothers, and perhaps even with his father, due to lingering doubts about his paternity. Chagatai was a strict adherent to the Yasa, almost to a fault. Tolui, the youngest, was a brilliant military commander, often leading the vanguard, but perhaps lacked the broader administrative vision required for the khanship. It was Ugade, the 3rd son, whom Genghis Khan chose as his successor, the Great Khan. This choice was profoundly significant. Ugadai was known for his calm demeanor, his diplomatic skills, and his ability to mediate disputes among his brothers. He was seen as the most balanced, the one most likely to uphold the unity of the empire. This decision, made by Genghis Khan himself, was a critical element in the empire's initial stability after his death. It prevented the immediate civil war that often plagued nomadic empires upon the death of their founder. He also allocated specific ulus, or appanages, to each of his sons and his brothers, vast territories that they would govern. But all ultimately subservient to the Great Khan. Jochi's line received the westernmost lands, forming the Golden Horde. Chagatai received Central Asia, and Ugadai, as Great Khan, retained the Mongol homeland and China. Tolui, as the youngest, received the traditional Mongol homeland and the bulk of the army, but was expected to serve Ugadai as a loyal subordinate. This division, while setting the stage for future fragmentation, initially provided a framework for shared governance. The death of Genghis Khan was kept a closely guarded secret for a time, allowing his generals to complete the conquest of the Tanguts. Yinchuan, the Tangut capital, finally fell in the summer of 1227. The city, after a prolonged siege, was utterly destroyed, its inhabitants massacred, a chilling warning to any who dared defy the Mongol might. This act, while brutal, served its strategic purpose. The Tangut state was extinguished, its potential for future rebellion eliminated, and the Mongol western flank secured for future campaigns into China. It was only after this final, decisive victory that the news of the Great Khan's passing was officially announced. His body was brought back to the Mongol homeland, a solemn procession across the vast steppes he had traversed so many times in life. The exact location of his burial remains one of history's most enduring mysteries. The Secret History of the Mongols states that he was buried in a secret location, somewhere near the sacred mountain of Burkhan Khaldun, where he had found refuge in his youth. According to tradition, his funeral escort killed everyone they encountered on the journey, and then the soldiers who buried him were themselves killed to ensure the secret remained inviolable. The site was then said to have been trampled by 1,000 horses and trees planted over it, further obscuring any trace. This practice of secret burial was not uncommon among nomadic peoples, reflecting a belief that the undisturbed rest of the great leader protected the destiny of the nation. Despite centuries of searching and countless expeditions, the tomb of Genghis Khan has never been found. Perhaps its secrets are still whispered only to the wind. Guarded by the vast, silent plains, the legacy of Genghis Khan is a complex tapestry woven with threads of unparalleled destruction and transformative empire building. His campaigns resulted in the deaths of millions, the obliteration of ancient cities, and the redrawing of the world map in blood. The scale of the violence, particularly in Persia and Central Asia, was immense, leading to demographic shifts and the destruction of irrigation systems that took centuries to recover. Yet, from the ashes of these conquests, a new order emerged. The Mongol Empire, under his successors, established the largest contiguous land empire in history, stretching from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean. This vast empire, born of conquest, paradoxically fostered an era of unprecedented connectivity. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, facilitated the safe passage of goods, ideas, and technologies across Eurasia. The Silk Road, once a perilous route, flourished under Mongol protection, leading to a vibrant exchange of cultures. Marco Polo's journey to China, for instance, would have been impossible without the stability and security provided by the Mongol Empire. Paper, gunpowder, printing, and the compass, all Chinese innovations, found their way westward, profoundly influencing European development. Conversely, Persian astronomy, Islamic medicine, and European metallurgy flowed eastward. The Mongol postal system, the Yam, with its network of relay stations and fresh horses, was an astonishing feat of logistical organization, ensuring rapid communication across the empire. It was a system that far surpassed anything seen in the West until much later. Genghis Khan's enduring impact also lies in his administrative innovations. He created a written script for the Mongol language, adapted from the Uyghur script, recognizing the importance of literacy for governance and the preservation of his people's history. He established a unified legal code, the Yasa, which, though often enforced with ruthless efficiency, brought a degree of order and predictability to the diverse peoples under Mongol rule. He promoted meritocracy within his army, elevating skilled commanders regardless of their tribal origin, a radical departure from the traditional aristocratic structures. He also practiced religious tolerance, a pragmatic approach that allowed him to govern diverse populations more effectively, drawing on the talents of various religious groups without imposing a single faith. While the primary motivation was likely practical, to avoid unnecessary rebellion, it stands in stark contrast to the religious persecutions common in many other empires of the era. The empire he founded, though it eventually fractured into separate khanates, profoundly reshaped the course of world history. It brought an end to old orders like the Jin and Tangut dynasties and opened up new possibilities. It accelerated the decline of feudalism in some regions and fostered the rise of new trade centers. The terror of the Mongol invasion left an indelible mark on the collective memory of many cultures, yet the subsequent period of peace and exchange laid some of the groundwork for the modern interconnected world. The echoes of his horse hooves, the whisper of the wind across the steppes, carried not just the dust of conquest, but the seeds of a new global consciousness, a testament to the man who rose from obscurity to forge an empire that touched the lives of millions and forever altered the human story. His life, from the desperate struggle for survival as a young boy to the undisputed master of vast lands, remains a compelling narrative of ambition, resilience, and an unyielding will to shape destiny. The vast shadow of Genghis Khan, even in his passing, stretched across the known world. His sons and grandsons, inheritors of an empire forged in fire and ambition, now stood poised to expand its boundaries even further, to refine its intricate machinery, and to leave an indelible mark on the tapestry of global history. The year of his death, 1227, did not signal an end to the Mongol conquests, but rather a transformation of their character. What had been the singular vision of one man now became the collective, though often fractious, enterprise of a ruling family. His third son, Ogedei, was chosen as the Great Khan, or Khagan, in 1229, following a Kurultai, a grand assembly, that solidified the succession. Ogedei, known for his affable nature and administrative acumen, embarked on a period of consolidation and expansion that saw the empire reach its greatest territorial extent. Under his reign, the Mongol capital of Karakorum, in present-day Mongolia, blossomed into a cosmopolitan hub. Ambassadors from distant lands, merchants, artisans, and scholars converged there, drawn by the Pax Mongolica, the relative peace and security that facilitated trade and communication across Eurasia. He ordered the construction of permanent administrative buildings, storehouses, and even a large silver tree fountain that dispensed various fermented beverages, a testament to the empire's burgeoning wealth and sophistication. The campaigns initiated by Ogedei were breathtaking in their scope. To the west, the Mongol armies, led by the brilliant General Subutai and Genghis Khan's grandson, Batu, launched a devastating invasion of Rus in 1236. City after city fell: Ryazan, Kolomna, Moscow, Vladimir, and Kiev. The siege of Kiev in 1240 was particularly brutal, leaving the once magnificent city largely in ruins. The sheer speed and coordination of the Mongol forces, coupled with their mastery of siege warfare and psychological tactics, left the fragmented Rus principalities little chance. This campaign effectively brought an end to Kievan Rus as a unified entity, ushering in centuries of Mongol dominance over vast swathes of Eastern Europe. Simultaneously, to the east, campaigns continued against the Jin dynasty in northern China. This was a long and arduous struggle. But by 1234, the Jin capital of Kaifeng had fallen, marking the definitive end of their rule. The Mongols then turned their attention to the southern Song dynasty, a formidable power with a rich culture and advanced technology, though this conquest would take many more decades to complete. The administrative systems, first conceived by Genghis Khan, were further developed under Ogedei. The Yasa, the Mongol legal code, was codified and enforced, providing a framework for governance across diverse populations. A sophisticated postal relay system, the YAM, was expanded, allowing for rapid communication across the vast distances of the empire. Relay stations, stocked with fresh horses and provisions, were established at regular intervals, ensuring that messages could travel hundreds of miles a day. This network was not merely for military communication. It also facilitated trade and the movement of officials, binding the disparate parts of the empire together. Taxation systems were refined, moving from arbitrary levies to more standardized assessments, though the methods of collection could still be harsh. Yet even as the empire expanded and its administrative machinery grew more complex, the seeds of internal division were beginning to sprout. The sheer size of the empire made centralized control increasingly difficult. The vast distances meant that the various branches of the ruling family, the descendants of Genghis Khan, began to develop their own interests and spheres of influence. The concept of the Mongol Empire as a unified entity, governed by a single great Khan, began to fray at the edges. Upon Ogedei's death in 1241, a period of regency and political maneuvering ensued. His widow, Torrigen, ruled as regent for several years, a remarkable feat for a woman in that era, demonstrating the significant influence women could wield within the Mongol court. Her rule, however, was marked by political intrigue and a weakening of central authority. The next great Khan, Guyuk, Ogedei's son, was finally elected in 1246, but his reign was short-lived, lasting only 2 years. His brief rule was characterized by attempts to reassert central control and a growing rivalry with Batu Khan, the leader of the Golden Horde in the west, who felt he had been unfairly sidelined in the succession. The succession struggle continued with the election of Mongol Khan in 1251, a grandson of Genghis Khan through his son Tolui. Mongol was a strong and capable ruler who sought to restore the empire's unity and administrative efficiency. He initiated further military campaigns, most notably sending his brother Hulagu west to conquer the Islamic heartlands and another brother, Kublai, to continue the conquest of the Southern Song dynasty in China. Hulagu's campaign in the Middle East was devastating. In 1258, he sacked Baghdad, the illustrious capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, bringing an end to a dynasty that had ruled for over 500 years. The destruction of Baghdad was a profound cultural and intellectual loss, as its libraries and scholarly institutions were among the most extensive in the world. From Baghdad, Hulagu's forces pushed further west, conquering Syria and threatening Egypt, until their advance was checked by the Mamluks at the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260. This battle, fought in present-day Israel, marked one of the first decisive defeats for the Mongol armies and signaled the westernmost extent of their expansion. Hulagu established the Ilkhanate, a Mongol state that would rule Persia and parts of the Middle East for nearly a century. Meanwhile, Kublai Khan, another grandson of Genghis Khan, was steadily consolidating his power in the east. He focused on the conquest of the Southern Song, a campaign that proved protracted and challenging due to the Song's naval strength and fortified cities. Kublai, however, was not merely a conqueror. He was also a shrewd administrator and a patron of culture. He recognized the need to govern the vast and sophisticated Chinese population differently from the nomadic Mongols. He adopted many Chinese administrative practices, established a new capital at Dadu, modern-day Beijing, and embraced aspects of Chinese culture. Though he maintained a distinct Mongol identity for the ruling elite. The death of Mongol Khan in 1259 sparked another major succession crisis, one that would irrevocably alter the structure of the Mongol Empire. Kublai and his younger brother Arik Bokeh both claimed the title of Great Khan, leading to a civil war that lasted for several years. This conflict, known as the Toluid Civil War, effectively fractured the empire into distinct, though sometimes allied, entities, khanates. While Kublai eventually emerged victorious and was proclaimed Great Khan, his authority over the other Mongol realms, the Golden Horde in Eastern Europe, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Ilkhanate in Persia, was largely nominal. Each Khanate increasingly pursued its own interests, developing its own unique cultural and political characteristics. Kublai Khan, though recognized as the Great Khan by many, primarily focused his energies on China. In 1271, he officially established the Yuan dynasty, proclaiming himself Emperor of China. This marked a significant shift, as the Mongol Empire, once a unified nomadic force, now had a settled imperial core in China. The complete conquest of the Southern Song was achieved in 1279, bringing all of China under Mongol rule for the first time. The Yuan dynasty oversaw a period of immense cultural exchange and technological innovation. The Pax Mongolica, though fragmented, still facilitated trade along the Silk Road, leading to a flourishing of sea, commerce, and the exchange of ideas, goods, and technologies between East and West. Marco Polo's famous journey to China and his service in Kublai Khan's court during this period are a testament to these unprecedented connections. However, the Mongol Empire as a single, unified entity was no more. The Golden Horde continued to rule over Rus for centuries, extracting tribute and influencing its political development. The Chagatai Khanate, centered in Central Asia, remained a powerful, though often turbulent, force. The Ilkhanate in Persia blended Mongol and Persian cultures, leaving a rich artistic and architectural legacy. And the Yuan dynasty in China, while a powerful and prosperous empire, eventually faced internal rebellions and was overthrown by the Ming dynasty in 1368, bringing an end to Mongol rule in China. Historians still debate the precise nature of the Mongol Empire after Genghis Khan. Was it a truly unified empire that gradually disintegrated, Or was it always a collection of semi-autonomous ulus, appanages, that simply became more independent over time? The reality likely lies somewhere in between. The initial vision of Genghis Khan was undoubtedly of a singular, vast domain. His successors, particularly Ogedei and Mongke, strove to maintain that unity. However, the sheer scale of the conquests, the diverse populations brought under Mongol rule, and the inherent rivalries among the ruling family made long-term centralized control incredibly challenging. The Mongol identity itself began to diversify. The Mongols of the Golden Horde adopted Islam and Turkic languages. Those of the Ilkhanate became Persianized, and those of the Yuan dynasty increasingly embraced Chinese customs. The legacy of Genghis Khan's empire, even in its fractured state, was profound. It fundamentally reshaped the political map of Eurasia, fostering unprecedented connections between distant cultures. The Silk Road flourished under Mongol protection, facilitating the movement of goods, technologies, and ideas, including gunpowder, printing, and the compass, from east to west. The administrative innovations, from the postal system to standardized taxation, influenced subsequent empires. The Mongol conquests, while undeniably destructive in their initial phases, ultimately led to a period of remarkable cultural exchange and economic integration across a vast continent. The echoes of their thunderous hooves continue to reverberate through the centuries, shaping the destinies of nations and peoples long after the last great Khan had passed into history.